Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 7th of June 2013. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comments. Coming up in the show, Microsoft reveals all with the Xbox One. We can talk about used games, we can talk about licensing, cloud gaming. What is cloud gaming? Pretty much everything we know about Xbox One coming up right about now, along with the OC Remix track of the day. So let's kick it off. For months, the Xbox One has been shrouded in mystery in terms of rather vital and important information. Rumors have circulated in regards to all sorts of crazy things, including always-on internet connection, always-on connect, no used games. Now, finally, Xbox has revealed pretty much everything we wanted to know, and has done so on its website. We now have full information and we can go down it point by point. What is it that the Xbox One does? What does it require? And what can we do with it? Okay, first things first, it will indeed require an internet connection that will verify once every 24 hours that you're not up to no good. So it's going to be keeping an eye on the notion of pirated games, cracking the system, and all sorts of things like that. If you do not manage to verify every 24 hours, then the console will refuse to play games. It will still allow you to watch television, and it will still allow you to play Blu-ray movies, but it will not play any games until a successful verification has occurred. However, the difference is that if you log onto a different Xbox to play a game in your library, it will check once per hour in order to make sure that no funny business is going on. That's important information to know. They've also said, in terms of the internet connection, that the cloud system can be turned off, which means that you do not necessarily have to share data to the cloud if you don't want to. They've also said that every game will be available on day one, either on disc or digital, and a rather interesting notion that your entire game library will be available on any Xbox One without a disc required. What this means is that even if you buy a game on disc, you have a digital copy stored which you can actually play. Now, they describe this as in the cloud, but what they really mean, of course, is a Steam-like system whereby once you purchase the license, you have access to essentially infinite backups. Now, let's talk about the internet-related stuff before we actually go on to the next segment, which will be about used games. So, here's the thing. It's not about average internet connection speed, it's not about our internet connections. This is the preconception that for some reason has been put into play. It's a nice little excuse. It gets people fighting. It gets that superiority complex going. Bear in mind that a lot of PR when it comes to gamers often exploits the competitive and, quite frankly, unempathetic nature of an awful lot of gamers. And the console wars in and of themselves, the PR battle between the two big companies, this is all very much orchestrated for a very good reason. It gets a lot of people talking. It makes people take sides, which people adore doing. And hell, you know, what's even better than saying, oh, you peasant, you don't have a fast enough internet connection. My internet connection is amazing, blah, blah, blah. This is not the problem. As usual, smoke and mirrors and deception and nonsense. The real problem is not the internet connection. The real problem is the server. The fact is we cannot rely on even the largest companies to keep these authentication servers running when we need them. As a direct result, what generally happens whenever this kind of system is put into place, and this very much is an online DRM system, it's not always on, but it's bloody close, right? It's consistent verification every single day. This is a huge drain on server resources, as you might imagine. It takes an awful lot to keep that running, but the fact of the matter is we cannot rely on those servers to actually be up when we need them to be. Even the most reliable services have downtime. Will they have backup solutions in place? Will we indeed see millions of people denied their gaming at a particular time because the damn thing can't authenticate? We very well might. And it's that very possibility, as far as I'm concerned, that is enough to say absolutely not. It is a terrible idea to have a system like this. The idea of having it check once an hour on someone else's system, that's not particularly good either for obvious reasons. You're going to see way more interrupted experiences as a direct result, you know. Once every 24 hours, okay, my internet's probably running, yeah? And it can try at various different times, I assume. I assume it's not dumb enough to check once every 24 hours, and if the connection is down on that very minute, it then says, nope, can't play your games. You know, I assume it's not dumb enough to do that. There's going to be a little bit of leeway here and there if they've got any damn sense. So you should be able to dodge most internet connectivity issues there without too much of a problem, assuming their servers are working. The once an hour thing, not so much. This has obviously been put in place to provide some kind of protection against potential cracking and piracy. However, the biggest reason behind that is actually so that you can't pseudo-lend your friend a bunch of your games, right? So let's say you give your account details to a friend, they log in, they play games, and what you could do if it had a fairly slow verification system, I imagine, is have a system where the guy logs in and then he disconnects his Xbox from the internet and plays the game for like 24 hours and then does it again. I assume it's designed to stop that, which I suppose is pretty reasonable, quite frankly. The website specifically states you can game offline for up to 24 hours on your primary machine. This is a bit of a problem for some people, admittedly. There is this rather brazen assumption that everybody has broadband internet. This is, of course, not the case at all. And there are many parts of the world where that is not necessarily accessible. You will need broadband internet in order to make this work. So there will be problems in very specific situations for, well, not so much large groups of people, but lots of little groups of people. On the positive side of things, this whole Steam backup thing is actually really, really good. A reliance on physical discs has become a real problem for consoles because those discs can be easily damaged. I'm not just talking about scratches, I'm talking about cracks. I mean, there were loads of people reporting that their console, like, shattered the disc and things like that. It can happen, it can get eaten by the dog, it can get snapped, it can get lost or stolen. The ability to have a digital copy that you can download at any time is really, really good. It's one of the primary benefits of Steam, and the fact that a console now actually has this, to me, is a major thing. It is a very consumer-friendly feature, and as far as I'm concerned, it's great that they put it in there. So, as much as I might hate the frequent verification system, the digital backup, as I'm now calling it, is actually a really good thing indeed, and we should definitely praise that. Okay, so let's move on to how gaming licensing will work on the Xbox. This is talking about used games primarily. Now, this is the thing that we have all been waiting for, as far as I can tell. So, let's talk about it, shall we? Sounds like a plan. Now, if you visit this page, you will find repeated information from the first one. I don't really know why that is, but let's go down to the stuff that's actually interesting. Okay, so first things first. Your friends and family, your guests and acquaintances get unlimited access to all of your games. Anyone can play your games on your console regardless of whether or not you are logged into it or the relationship to you. So basically, unlimited amount of guest accounts on your Xbox One that can play all of your games. So there you go. Next point is pretty interesting. Give your family access to your entire games library anytime, anywhere. Basically, that means that up to 10 members of your family, which I assume you have to list in some way, can log in and play from your shared games library on any Xbox One. It is also possible for you to be logged in and playing your games, as well as one family member on a different machine playing from your shared library at a given time. So that's fairly interesting. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute after we've rounded up the rest of it. Here's the big meat. This is on the subject of used games. You can trade in your games at participating retailers only. Okay, so that's a change from the current status quo. Basically, it means that you will not have as many options, but you can trade your games in. However, the catch to this is that game publishers can enable you to trade in your games. So that would directly appear to be some kind of serial code registration system. I have to assume that's what it is. Very, very similar to the way that Steam works. Now applied to console games. So it is a hardware solution, as we assumed that it would be, but with participation from the retailers. So it's actually a little bit of both of what we heard previously. Now, they do also claim that they do not charge a platform fee to retailers, publishers, or consumers for enabling transfer of these games. So that would appear to be a direct denial of the rumors that came from MCV Magazine claiming that there would be a substantial fee applied to each of these titles. Now, the last part, give games to your friends. Game publishers can enable you, again, that key word there, to give your disc-based games to your friends. There are no fees charged as part of these transfers. However, there are two requirements. You can only give them to people who have been on your friends list for at least 30 days. That's your Xbox Live friends list. And each game can only be given once. What that means is, once you have given that game once, it is impossible for that person to then trade it or sell it to somebody else. So there is a one-time trade or gifting option for titles that you already own. Alright, so before we get to the used stuff, let's go back up that list and talk a little bit about the games library thing. Alright, so unlimited user accounts that can access all of your games. That seems to be more of a convenience thing than anything else, although really that's not actually a change at all, considering on Xbox 360, you just do it by having the disc in the drive. Oh, the disc's in the drive, yeah, I can play the game. So this is really no change whatsoever, it's just a more complex solution to a problem that they themselves created on Xbox One. Really, it doesn't make any difference at all, to be fair. Now, the next part, this is actually really interesting. The idea that you will be able to play from your shared games library on any Xbox One, okay? So that means you'll be able to log in and play from it. Up to 10 members of your family can do it. So let's say you have 20 games, and they're all registered automatically to your library. Then up to 10 people will be able to log in and access your library. And it also means that you and one other person can be simultaneously on your library at any given time. So the clarification that needs to be made on this is whether or not it is actually possible for two players to be playing the same game. If that was possible, then that would actually be a fantastic feature. Very, very good indeed. Probably not going to happen. The ability to access the same game library on multiple machines is actually really good for families, and I very much approve of that feature. That's actually a good feature. I would also actually kill for that feature on Steam. Like, if I'm totally frank, now that I have a gaming tablet, the Razer Edge, that allows me to play a lot of Steam games, being able to be logged into my Steam account on 2 separate machines simultaneously would be amazing! That would be fantastic, but we don't have that. You can only have one person on at any given time. I have actually got to give Microsoft praise for that. That is actually a pretty cool feature. That is something that we have not previously had. Okay, so now onto the bad news for some people, the whole trade-in thing. So, I pointed this out several days ago and people ignored me. Well, confirmed. It's all down to the publisher. The publisher will decide whether or not you can actually trade the game in. This is good news for us because it means you can pressure specific publishers if you believe that this is a bad thing. Yeah? This gives you a direct course of action. You can boycott titles from publishers that don't want you to do this, that lock off the trading system if you believe that you are entitled to the trading system. If you don't boycott the games, then you complain anyway, well, you're not going to really get much done, are you? Unfortunately, hashtags don't fix problems. Real action does. Now, as much as I don't feel sorry for GameStop, considering their ridiculous business practices, I do very much feel sorry for independent game stores who were perhaps keeping their doors open via the sale of used titles. It's a really tough situation because, yes, I believe that the publisher and the developer are entitled to be paid for their work. I've got to believe that till the end of my days. But seeing, say, small independent shops go out of business because they are not allowed to actually trade in games, I have to wonder how they're even going to do that. Are they going to actually just apply business pressure, or will there be some kind of technical solution to this? I would like to know. Unfortunately, we're probably not going to know about that for a long time, considering that Microsoft just cancelled their post-conference one-on-one interviews as well as the press roundtable. So chances are we're not going to know that again for quite some time. Regardless of my opinion on used games, it is safe to say that this is anti-consumer, and this is a move from the status quo in an anti-consumer direction. That's confirmed. Give games to your friends. So this is good and bad, okay? It's good because it allows you to trade a digital game to somebody else. It allows you to revoke your license and give it to somebody else. Now, for me, as someone that uses Steam a lot, that would be an amazing feature. I would love to be able to have that feature. But the thing that you've got to consider is that it sounds great on paper until you realize, hang on a second, you were able to do that anyway with physical games. You were just able to give them the disc, and that was a transfer of the license because you couldn't run it without the disc. So this is actually a restriction. And they've also added a restriction that says they've got to be on the friends list for 30 days before you can do it, and that you can only do it once. So that severely limits the trading that you can do amongst friends. This is probably the worst part of the whole thing, yeah? Because the trading amongst friends and the selling it to a friend kind of thing that's going on there was kind of a natural part of console gaming, and this is a restriction. The 30 days friendless thing is directly aimed at eBay and Craigslist. Yeah, basically it says, you as a third party, yeah, good luck selling your game. You won't be able to do it. You will have to trade it into a specific retailer. Again, regardless of my opinions on used games and the rather grey, sketchy area of the law, which involves the ownership of licenses and so on and so forth, this is the most anti-consumer part of the whole thing. It is more anti-consumer than the trade-in thing, but it's tied directly into it. As much as I've talked about the idea that the trade-in restrictions hit retailers, actually, if you look at this system, there are two very specific entities that are very clearly in cahoots to limit your rights as a consumer and to limit what you can do with games. And they are the retailers and they are Microsoft. They have come to an agreement which allows the larger retailers to still benefit immensely from this system and screws over the ability for somebody to just sell a game that they don't want to play anymore on eBay or Craigslist. And it even restricts the friendship thing. You can sell it to a friend, but it is restricted in how you can do that. You can only do it once, and you can only do it if they've been on the friends list for 30 days, which I can imagine is going to be extremely annoying. It's also been confirmed that loaning or renting games won't be available at launch, so if you expected those games to pop up in Redbox, you will, of course, be sadly mistaken. However, it is entirely possible that they will create rental-specific copies in order to actually make that happen. We will see. I don't know where that's going, honestly, and obviously it's a minor part of the process, but we will need to know exactly what's happening in that respect. Now, the third and final part of it. This is about the Kinect and privacy concerns. So, let's go through it. By design, you will determine how responsive and personalized your Xbox One is to you and your family during setup. The system will navigate you through key privacy options like automatic or manual sign-in, privacy settings, and clear notifications about how data will actually be used. When Xbox One is on and you're simply having a conversation in your living room, your conversation is not being recorded or uploaded. Okay. Obviously, they're not going to say that it is being recorded or uploaded, but hey. You are in control of when Kinect sensing is on or off or paused. If you don't want the Kinect sensor on while playing games or enjoying your entertainment, you can pause Kinect. To turn off your Xbox One, just say Xbox off. When the system is off, it only listens for Xbox on. It doesn't listen for anything else. And you can actually turn that feature off as well. They also clarify saying that some apps and games may require Kinect functionality. It then says you are in control of your personal data. So you can play games, enjoy applications that use data such as videos, photos, and facial expressions, heart rate, and more, but this data will not leave your Xbox One without your explicit permission. And they talk about a few examples like a fitness game with a heart rate, for instance. You can turn that kind of thing off. A card game that would allow you to bluff your virtual opponent using your facial expressions and so on and so forth. So, yeah, that's the information there. And finally, you can use other inputs to control your games, TV, and entertainment experiences. So you don't have to use the Kinect to navigate this stuff. You can use a pad, although it recommends the Kinect gesture and voice control. Okay, so I mean, this is really the most clear-cut part of this entire announcement, and it's exactly what we expected to hear, basically because if they'd said anything otherwise, there would have been an outrage. I'm not just talking about consumers, I'm talking about actual governments saying, what the hell? You know, this most likely violates a huge amount of privacy laws and so on and so forth. I think the problem here is not really going to be the functionality in their privacy policy, it's going to be a lack of trust in the technology and the company behind it. Do you trust Microsoft not to use the Kinect in some abusive fashion? I'm not talking about looking at you naked. I'm not even talking about, oh, you could hack the Kinect and so on and so forth. That's less likely than getting stuff hacked on a PC, right? So I don't think that's really gonna happen. Maybe it will. It's a possibility. I mean, I suppose even the very possibility that it might happen is concerning to some people, but you've also got to bear in mind that you're talking about people that use laptops with inbuilt cameras, you're talking about people that have phones on them at all times that could be doing exactly the same thing. I don't think that's the big issue, it's about trusting the company. Do you trust the company to not use the Kinect to say, scan the room to get demographic information and serve you specific ads? Do you trust the company not to data mine some data in order to market to you? Because there are already patents available for that kind of thing that are registered to Microsoft itself. The fact that you have to have the Kinect plugged in is also a problem. What if the Kinect breaks? I mean, that basically shuts down your entire machine. It would not run without it. That's already been made abundantly clear. You need the Kinect on. So that actually adds a second piece of hardware that could fail and could prevent you from actually using your system. Not to mention the fact, of course, that this thing is attached by a cable, it's balanced on top of something, it could very easily knocked over and broken. There's all sorts of potential problems with that. So I always disapprove of adding on extraneous hardware that isn't really needed because it can cause an additional state of failure. So that pretty much rounds everything up. Some good news, mostly bad. I think it's really safe to say that. I think this is a lot of stuff that will put off an awful lot of people. There is already a storm surrounding this, as you might imagine, and I can only think that going into E3, this is going to be an awful lot worse. It makes sense that Microsoft tried to get ahead of this before the E3 questions came in, and they evidently do not want to talk about it, considering the press roundtable and the one-on-one interviews that they've cancelled across the board at E3. They want to focus on the games, which is about the only thing they can really do right now to actually really get ahead in this PR battle. Currently, Sony is slapping them about. What I've got to say, though, this is what really interests me. The ball is now in Sony's court. We need to know whether Sony has some kind of system in place, whether it be with retailers or some kind of technical system that would restrict used games in some way. Because I have to imagine the scenario that publishers really don't want used games out there, right? Most publishers, anyway. Some of them have come out and said, well, you know, we'd prefer they weren't out there, but we're not really all that concerned. Most would prefer that they didn't exist, because they make more money that way. What happens if PS4 does not have a system like that, and then all the publishers turn around and say, well, we're only making games for the Xbox now? And it might even not be simply down to how popular a system is. Like, what happens if the PS4 gets a great start, and then all the publishers turn around and say, we're not making games for it anymore? You can't run a console on first-party releases only. You can't do it. It's not good enough. So there is the risk that even if the PS4 was the better machine, even if it initially has the better start, then the Xbox ends up being the dominant one because it has that third-party support. At the end of the day, the vast majority of consumers do not care enough about these issues to not purchase the latest and greatest game that they really, really want. And to be honest, most gamers don't either. We've seen how weak-minded a lot of gamers are when it comes to actually maintaining boycotts. So just bear that one in mind. So the next call has got to come from Sony. We need to know details from them in terms of the policies surrounding used games and in terms of whether or not there are any systems in place to restrict third-party sales and so on and so forth. You can read the whole thing over on news.xbox.com. It is available there as part of the Xbox Wire. I'm looking forward to hearing all of your remarks on it. No doubt this will be one of the most commented episodes, I think, in Content Patch history, so don't let me down in that respect. And that, as I say, is that. That was the entire show. Well, you know, it's a very, very important topic to talk about. A lot of info there. So, before I go, I'd like to bring you the OC Remix track of the day. Sounds like a good idea. Not one of the more popular Castlevania titles coming out here. This is a remix by Joshua Morse, and it's definitely a little unusual. A little bit of jazz, a little bit of swing, a little bit of samba involved in this, and it is from the game Order of Ecclesia, which is the DS game. The name of the remix is quite simply called Sparkle, and it came out in 2010, and it is a remix of the track Emerald Mist. Very unusual track. Very much indeed. It's nice and smooth, it's a bit funky. It's cool. I like it a lot. It's not a theme that most of you will know, but I think you'll enjoy this one greatly. Of course, you can download it in the description below this video. Everything from OC Remix is free. That's pretty much me done for the week. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you have a great weekend. Please do be safe, and I will see you next time.